Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations. This podcast is in partnership with Evergreen Podcasts, and every week we dive into the topics of mental health, adversity, spirituality, and societal issues. I'm your host, Furkhan. In this week's episode, I sit down with Birgitta, a soul empowerment coach, light language healer, and divine channel. Birgitta shares her tumultuous journey of overcoming childhood trauma, abuse, and dysfunctional relationships. She discusses her path to healing through various holistic practices such as Reiki and shamanic healing. Birgitta also explores the concepts of twin flames and soulmates and the importance of self love and forgiveness. Despite many challenges, Birgitta remains resilient, balancing her corporate job and spiritual work. This episode highlights her relentless pursuit of inner peace and personal growth. Birgitta is a modern day mystic who guides others on a journey of self discovery and empowerment. As a soul empowerment coach and divine channel, she tunes into higher frequencies and delivers messages from the many light beings and master teachers. With her gift for light language healing, she weaves light codes that activate transformation in those seeking alignment with their soul's purpose. She is the co author of Become Empowered: Echoes of Grace and Strength, a remarkable book filled with real life stories of women's transformation and triumph. She is the author of Becoming Authentically Me, a testament to her resilience and strength. With grace and determination, she has fearlessly tread a path that defies societal norms and expectations. Her story radiates like a beacon of hope and inspiration, illuminating the way for all of us to realize our potential for growth and empowerment. Her unwavering honesty and vulnerability are a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to heal, overcome, and embrace our true selves. I really hope you get a lot out of this episode. Please check out all the ways you can find Birgitta online in the show notes. And before we jump into the episode today, here's a brief word for our sponsors. Are you tired of the same workout trends and fads and then falling into a comparison mindset? Well, we here at Easy Conversations have partnered with WeShape. WeShape believes that because we're unique, our workouts should be too. Their technology personalizes every single exercise in real time based on the individual's feedback during the workout. Their workouts are based on science and biomechanics. Better programming means working out smarter, not harder. You can go to WeShape.com/easy to do a quiz and get a personalized workout for free for 14 days. And if you're interested, you can check out the link in the descriptions to get 35% off all their plans. Go to WeShape.com/easy and personalize your workout today and change your routine. Are you frustrated as much as I am with having your data compromised online? Well, this is why Easy Conversations has partnered with Aura. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information, automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Unfortunately, data brokers will sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. I often get emails that I'm not sure if I should be opening them or if there's something hidden in there. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out. Every week, Aura sends me a summary of all the opt-out requests it submitted on my behalf, and I don't have to worry about it. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. I don't know if you saw this, but AT&T recently revealed that over 72 million customer records, both existing and former customers, were released on the dark web. They recommend those affecting using strong passwords, monitoring account activity, and considering credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. Well, Aura does all this for me, and best of all, I don't have to download several different apps just because a company couldn't keep my data secure. If my info was compromised in the AT&T data breach, I wouldn't worry because Aura is always on, always doing the hard work of keeping me safe. I value my privacy, and as my audience, I also value yours. You can go to aura.com/easy10 or check out the link in the description to get your free 2-week trial. Managing your data online is not only important for you, but it's also good for your mental health. So check out Aura today at aura.com/easy10. Birgitta, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I've had the opportunity to understand your story and where you've come from, and there's a lot of things I feel like people can relate to. There's so many points where I felt like I could relate in terms of turning points in life and choosing a specific path. And then we've also have another commonality in terms of working for, at least I used to work for the same Fortune 500 company. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to speak with you in the past. But before we start our conversation, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Furkhan, thank you so much for having me on this. Well, it's a sunny Sunday here in Spain.
Yeah.
So a little bit about me. I'll put it in a nutshell.
Sure.
And that is that I'm a soul empowerment coach, a light language healer, and divine channel. But then, I have I'm the author of Becoming Authentically Me, the co-author of Become Empowered. And then there's another collaboration book coming out in August, and my second solo book, Child of the Sun, En route to Enlightenment in India, which comes out in probably September.
Well, thanks for that. And Becoming Empowered came out in April, I believe, as you mentioned.
It came out. Yeah, that's right. It did. Oh my gosh, we're ready in June.
Yeah. And in terms of your journey, I know you share a little bit in your book in terms of trauma and abuse early in life. And that's fairly common for a lot of people, including I've worked as a therapist for over a year now, and that is fairly prevalent for many people as they're trying to then navigate through adult life. And sometimes people avoid the past, and sometimes people are dealing with it. There's really no timeline. I think healing happens for everyone differently.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you, and how did it shape your entire adult life?
You mean the healing process?
Yes, and dealing with some of that trauma from early on in life, right?
So, for me, first of all, looking back, would I have changed? Would I have my life any other way? No, because I'm grateful for all my experiences and all the characters that have been in my playbook of life, because I wouldn't be who I am today, and I wouldn't have a story to tell. So that's how I look at it.
Yes.
But, yes, I was abused as a kid by a friend of the family, or rather molested. And, so that was already a catalyst, because as a child, you don't understand these things. And the 1980s were very different to the time era that we live in now. And so I kept it bottled inside because I didn't understand. And so then my dad passed away when I was 14. I just turned 14, coronary heart disease. And basically, Furkhan kind of stepped out of life. He didn't take his medication. When he just went cycling, and boom, last breath, fell off his bike. So could we call it, I've always said, was it a form of suicide? Maybe it was, because he was tired of life. As it doesn't matter if you lose a parent or a grandparent. When you're a teenager, it's always tough. And it was the first time I actually woke up with a headache the next day, and I really thought to myself, it's got to be a dream, but it wasn't. And by that time, I was already kind of starving myself. I would just throw away my school lunches, and I would nicely sit at the dinner table and just eat my food. But it was something that probably for about to well in my 40s, it was something that, that was my superpower, not eating, because that was something I could control. And that was the same for working like a maniac. It was something I could control because I was running away from my emotions. And that's what we do. Everyone has a different outlet. And my mom did put me on a modeling course, just trying to create my confidence, because I had this immense fear of boys. I was being bullied in high school, and because I was very tall and very skinny. And so, some of the kids, the popular kids, like to pick on me. And then when my mom put me on a modeling course just to crick up my confidence, that didn't really help me because there was so much trauma that I had within me
Right.
that it didn't shift.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the modeling industry, I was assaulted by a hairdresser in New York. I traveled the world. I've moved more
Mm-hmm.
times than my age. Could I live off the modeling? Oh, heck no. Why did I do it? Why was I such a sadomasochist in wanting to do that? Because I just wanted to prove to people that I could be someone. That's
Mm.
insane. But,
Yeah.
but that's how, I was very young at the time. And I just wanted to show people that I could be someone. And so, but I could never live of it. Never. I was, wherever I went, I was either bartending, hostessing, doing promotional work, or admin work, because you could put me in the desert, as I always say. I'm like a little chameleon, and I will always find work. And that's always been a drive within me. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but when I lost my stepdad in 2000, yeah, I was 20, nearly 25. Was it 25? I was 25. Yes. Gosh, the math. And he had cancer, throat
Mm-hmm.
cancer. And when he passed away, my mom was leaning on me because I used to help her out every weekend. I would travel from London to Buckingham in
Mm-hmm.
Buckinghamshire. And I ended up doing drugs with the people that I knew in London. And
Mm-hmm.
it was really, and I think many people can relate to this. A lot of people like to see people's happy face because they're
Mm-hmm.
so used to it, because they're so used to getting that advice from the happy person. And so when the
Mm-hmm.
happy person is down, it's like, yeah, that can't happen. You can talk about it for
Right.
2 minutes, but that's it. And so I kind of
Mm-hmm.
rolled with the punches and took like drugs for 3 months, suffered a blackout, memory loss, and that is not fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so I quit from one day to the next. And yeah, I rolled into very dysfunctional relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a late bloomer. I was 21 and a half. And the guy was Turkish because I was living in Istanbul at the time. And it was, yeah, like I said, I was so broken on the inside that I attracted that brokenness in another.
Right. Yeah.
The relationships, it doesn't matter, a romantic, interpersonal, family. We choose characters in our lives that trigger us and that
Right.
can teach us because we're reflections of one another. But at the time, well, what did I know? I was so young. And it was like I didn't understand why it wasn't working. And there was so much miscommunication. And I do remember, and I remember as a kid, my dad used to throw plates when he was angry. I saw him do it once. And so that's the exact same thing that I did. I was frustrated and I just
Mm.
threw plates. But that's how I was.
Yeah.
And I remember that this guy from Turkey said, Birgitta, I don't know you. I don't understand you because you do not communicate with me. And I
Yeah.
didn't understand that. I said, yes, I do communicate with you. He's like, no, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And because you can communicate, but then there's that you can communicate and really just open your heart and be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
So I rolled from one relationship into several years later, another dysfunctional one because it just kept going. It just kept
Of
going.
course.
And even though I was working, I just functioned the way that I had been conditioned. And that went on for quite some years until 2009, where I really hit rock bottom. And, my ex was like a part-time crack addict. And what I
Mm-hmm.
did was I paid for his flight to come over from the US to Holland. And I shouldn't have done that. But that was me,
Yeah.
I was everyone's little savior. I was just like this caped superhero, and I wanted to save all these broken birds rather than letting them walk their own journey, because that's what we do. And
Yes.
yeah, so we were okay for, well, not even a few months, but then I found out that he was doing crack and he pawned my stuff. He broke into my home after I'd kicked him out. and the police deported him. They escorted him to the airport in Amsterdam and left him there. Well, that wasn't working, because then he came back. And I had this call. I do remember this. I had this call from the train station. I'm sorry, but there's a suitcase here at a certain station on the way to Amsterdam. I'm like, excuse me? Well, can you please pick it up? I'm like, okay. Oh, fine. I'll pick it up. So I picked it up. But the thing is, he did want to get better, but he didn't have social for Holland. And so it was like a catch-22 situation.
Yeah.
And then he landed in bed with the Dutch Crips, and it got from bad to worse, and he was held for ransom. And long story short, I mean, I did help the police find him. And when they did, they finally deported him back to the US. But in the meantime, my mom had gotten me out of Holland, and she found me an apartment that I rented in the UK. And I was there, and I got a phone call from the leader of the Crips, and he's like, if I ever find you, you're going to be dead. I'm going to kill you. That's exactly what he said. And he said, if I ever find your ex, you will never find him again, because he'll be lying dead in a ditch somewhere. And that just shook me to my core. And I downed a whole box of like ibuprofens. And that was a very lame attempt at my own life, because I was feeling so low. And yeah, so I had to find a way to pick myself up, because I couldn't go on like that anymore. When you hit rock bottom like that, you can either stay where you are, and remain in that victimhood of feeling sorry for yourself, or you can really say, you know what, I owe it to myself to create a better life. It's all about taking that responsibility and that accountability for our lives. And so I did, and I went to see a counselor, and the counselor was like, after listening to me talk for like an hour, she's like, Birgitta, you're fine. You're strong enough. I mean, Furkhan, what am I going to do with that? Nothing. Yeah. Absolutely nothing. So I didn't come here with a cheat sheet to earth, as I always say. And so I had to figure it out. And so that's when I started my holistic journey, because I found a Reiki healer that really, really helped me. And the one thing that she said is, Birgitta, you allow people to treat you like a doormat because you're so afraid, one, of speaking your truth, but also afraid of hurting other people. There's that fear ingrained within you. And Furkhan, I always say fear is false evidence appearing real. Yeah, but it also means either you fall endlessly or you arise revolutionary, and the choice is yours. But fear is just a beta blocker in the mind that we've created because of the conditioning. Yes. Parental conditioning, social conditioning, you name it. And so I studied Reiki, EFT, the emotional freedom technique, became a meditation teacher. I studied many, many healing modalities, because I was really like a SpongeBob, absorbing everything. And by the way, my ex is doing really well for himself now. It took him some years to, heal his, or, maul through his demons, so to speak, and heal the demons within. But he's healed, and it's just beautiful to see. And it doesn't matter what we go through. Honestly, it doesn't matter, as long as you understand that you can create better todays or better tomorrows from this point forward, and rather than keep deflecting, it's all about reflecting within. And understanding, reevaluating our lives, and understanding, hey, you know what? Why am I doing this to myself? Or why is this person triggering me? What is it doing for me? It's not, why is this happening to me? But actually, why is this happening for me? And how can I evolve from that?
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being so vulnerable. And very critical thing to mention there in terms of what is this, or why is this happening for me? And we often lose sight of that, right? And you touched on so many things in terms of just, at one point you mentioned being a chameleon, right? And that's the aspect of people pleasing that we all tend to fall into. And some of the things you mentioned around this fear of hurting others by speaking your truth. And I think that's something, as you've alluded to, we get conditioned to do early on. And in your story, there was a part that was mentioned around just your mom also got you into modeling to fix your posture, right? Because you were
Yeah.
carrying all this weight, and
Yes.
it's obvious, right, from your story that you managed to do that throughout your life until you got to that point of healing. And often what I find with people when they have these early experiences of abuse, we tend to feel like we're broken, right? And we'll try to seek out that validation outside of ourselves, and that can be a endless pursuit because that's never going to be enough. There's nothing, there's never enough to do to get that validation, and we're always chasing it, which is often a form of addiction too, right?
Yeah,
And you mentioned in your story you did come forward with that abuse experience with your mom, and you mentioned it to her.
I
What
did.
was that like? Because a lot of the times what happens is people on the receiving end are so devastated, they experience shame themselves to admit that, oh, I let this happen, or this was happening and I didn't know, or I couldn't do anything about it. So they often fall into denial, and then they try to deny the whole situation. But what was that like for you, and when you came forward with the truth?
It was when we were watching an Oprah Winfrey episode
Mm-hmm.
on abuse, and my mom said, I'm glad it never happened to either of you. And so I
Mm-hmm.
remained quiet, and then it came out. My mom said, she's like, was it your dad? I'm like, no, it wasn't. And then I
Mm-hmm.
told her, but it was very hard for me because my mom wanted me to talk about it, and I didn't want that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, and this is parents for you. She was really like pushing and pushing for me to talk about it. And the more she did that, the more I retreated.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I mean, when I was 19, that was in the 1993, and so even then times were different, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see a counselor or anything, so I just kept it with me. Like I said, these days it's very different. People are more open to hearing, or actually, well, there's hearing and listening, rather listening.
Yeah.
And yeah, so for me, I just kept walking around with it because I couldn't give it a place. It took me many, many, many years to give
Mm-hmm.
that a place. And it's one of the reasons why my relationships were so dysfunctional. And that wasn't the
Mm-hmm.
last dysfunctional relationship. There was another one that was really bad. As my sister recently said, that is actually domestic abuse. And I never saw it that way. I mean, I've forgiven this guy. It was
Mm-hmm.
another experience for me, and I needed to go through it to continue with my holistic journey, continue
Mm-hmm.
with healing, myself. And that's
Yeah.
how I see it. And again, we can keep deflecting and pointing fingers, but it's all about taking that responsibility. And even though
Mm-hmm.
things happen in our youth that may not be our fault, because we're
Right.
kids, at the end of the day, when we become adults, it's like, deal with it and heal.
Yes.
That's the most important thing. And it's not healing from the outside in, it's healing from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So, and it's really following your inner north compass, as I always say. And it's something that I really had to learn. And it doesn't mean that my life is always a bed of roses. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still learning every single day. But
Yes.
I have a better understanding of why we experience things in life. And
Mm-hmm.
our experiences, as I always say, it's like a game of Mario Brothers where you have to level up. Oh, where you have to level up. And you are on a certain level of an experience, and you have the baddies and the triggers, and you have to get past them. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually, when you've got that, you level up, you go to the next level.
Yeah.
And life is kind of like that. And
Mm-hmm.
your experience are here not to downgrade you, but to help elevate your consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and to make you understand what life is all about, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I've used a similar analogy where life is like that video game, right?
Yeah.
So you constantly repeat that level until you figure it out, and then you move on to the next level.
Yeah.
And sometimes you may die a few times in that level, and then you have to keep coming back. I remember playing Super Mario as a kid, and that was the case, right? Until you
Yeah.
actually figured out how to pass that level. And the other thing you touched on was the relationships, right? And I think there's an aspect of they are meant to be our teachers as well,
Yes.
whether or not we're willing to see it that way. And sometimes when you have that higher resolution view, you could see, oh yeah, there's so many things I was repeating or patterns I was repeating that weren't serving me. And we tend to beat ourselves up at times, but often when you're going through that healing journey, you realize that, wow, like now I know what doesn't serve me, and now I know what I need that
Yeah.
actually does serve me. And that is also a part of healing. And as you said, that's an ongoing journey. I think we all need to realize that, because it is also easy to realize that or look at it in the sense that I'm doing all this work and I'm healing, but I
Yeah.
still continue to make mistakes. And that's the beauty of it, right? It's if it was
Yes.
just if we figured it out all one day, then I think life would be pretty boring.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it keeps things exciting. In your book, you talk about twin flames. So I'm curious to understand that, because I've experienced something similar. And I think those are our biggest teachers, because
Yes.
you could say
Yes.
we are either inviting them into our life, or there is an aspect of synchronicity there that's meant to happen for us to learn. And
Yes.
you could say, oh, maybe there is an aspect of determinism there, but I do think it's fascinating when you do a highlight reel of your life.
So people always ask me, what's the difference between a twin flame and a soulmate?
Mm.
I always say twin flames, you're split from the same nucleus. It's quite fascinating. So yeah, my twin flame is on this plane, yes. But you don't always incarnate, in the same lifetimes. But many have incarnated in the current paradigm, so to speak, to help elevate the consciousness of humanity and the earth. But
Mm-hmm.
soulmates, by the way, before I hit back on twin flames, soulmates are, mates for your soul. They help you
Yeah.
grow, they help you evolve. And twin flames are there to, whoa, that's really deep trauma surfacing, because that's what it's about. It's about healing. And it's like fast track to healing. You could say that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened to me in 2009, where I really had to go within and figure it out, because that's how deep it went.
Yeah.
And twin flames, the funny thing is, and for everyone that's different, but I can step into the energy, and see what goes on. It's different to soulmates. I think because twin flames are so connected, even on an ethereal level, or the astral planes. You just know what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
what's happening. But they're beautiful relationships, and twin flames don't always end up with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And twin flames can even be a best friend. It
Mm-hmm.
can be a family member. So it's not just romantic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but when they do vibe from that same hymn sheet, they can accomplish a lot. But if they don't vibe from the same hymn sheet, they're not on that same level of consciousness, then it's adios. And and that's okay. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one important aspect that I forgot to mention, and that's across the board with all relationships, is that we have to accept one another as we are, and we have
Mm-hmm.
to allow for people to walk their own journey, rather than keeping that control, because that's how I was. That's really
Mm-hmm.
how I was, because I love to mold people to the
Mm-hmm.
image that I wanted of them, and that's not the way it works. That's not love.
Right.
And that's the thing about love. We put so many clauses on it, so many conditions on it, and love is unconditional, because love is our essence. And when we
Mm-hmm.
understand that love is our essence, it's okay to let people go. It's okay
Mm-hmm.
for them to walk their own journey, because you cannot stop. If you don't do that, you're going to stop their growth, but you're also stopping your own growth. And why
Mm-hmm.
are you doing that to yourself? Yeah.
Yeah.
But
No,
we know
I
any different.
I appreciate that for sure. And I think with the twin flame situation, it is very intense, high
Very.
intensity. I think you touched on this earlier and you mentioned it again in terms of that control, wanting to mold, trying to be the savior. I have a view on that, but I just want to get your thoughts in terms of do you feel like it was more if I can focus on fixing this person or molding them, then I don't have to look at myself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what we do, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's again that sense or just that avoidance.
Yeah.
And Freud talked about it quite a bit in terms of defense mechanisms that we build early in life and then they continue to show up in our adult life unless, again, we're willing to look at it and start that healing journey. And speaking of the healing journey, you touched on it, but you, in your story, there's a rock bottom in terms of having a night where you blacked out. And I bring this up because
Yeah.
that was a similar experience for me where one day I woke up, I'm like, that was scary. And I don't want to experience that ever again. And looking back, I'm so grateful that for me, the divine intervention of that moment, as scary and frightening as it was, like, okay, this is a second chance if I want to look at it. And this is an opportunity now for me to course correct. And that really shaped a different trajectory for me because I started making very mindful choices.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I still have had one or two experiences after that where I'm like, okay, here's another moment. But that one, as I've alluded to, was definitely a wake up call. And it seems like you had something similar. What was going through your head as you look back and you're like, whoa, something's not right? Because I know for me, I could see the path leading down to something very terrible.
So when I blacked out, you mean when I took the
Mm-hmm.
drugs? Yeah. I mean it was because for me it was also because I had sex and I wasn't even aware of it, and that was a violation. That was
Mm-hmm.
like a wake up call. Well, a first wake up call, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I just quit from one day to the next
Mm-hmm.
because that is just, it's like, what are you doing with your life?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, I mean, yes, I altered the path in a sense, no more drugs, but I still had a lot more trauma to go through,
Mm-hmm.
a lot more. And
Yeah.
yeah, so, but blacking out like that, it's not, it's not fun. It's not
Mm-hmm.
fun. But, I take full responsibility for that because I did it to myself.
Right.
Totally did it to myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there, I'm assuming there was a sense of fear around, okay, this could have been a lot
Oh, it could have
worse.
been a lot worse. Oh,
Okay.
I couldn't even breathe properly. It was
Mm-hmm.
that bad, that bad. And I do remember them just, putting water over me. And I just wonder, if I had taken any more, I don't think I would have been here anymore. Just don't think I
Mm-hmm.
would have.
So what was like the commitment you made to yourself? Obviously, you said that wasn't just one day you were like, you decided, okay, things are going to change, and that was it. There's still a progression that needed to take place.
Yes.
But in order for that progression to take place, you had to chart some sort of direction. And that often requires a commitment to the self. I know for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to start loving myself here for a little bit and see how that feels. And that was such a change. And it felt good finally. But it was a commitment I made to myself that day. And as I started to stick with it and lean into it, I started to see a different path emerging. It's like that Rumi saying, which I'll paraphrase, where as soon as you start walking on towards the way appears,
Yes.
and that's what it felt like for me as I
Yeah.
look back.
Yeah. I don't think that happened to me at that time because I was
Mm-hmm.
still, there was still a lot of trauma within me.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me many, many, many years after that. And like I said, even in 2015, 2016, I had somebody that was just very controlling, very obsessed with me. He couldn't let me go. Told him I didn't love him anymore, but he couldn't understand that. He's like, people work things out. Again, same pattern what I did. Paid the bills because he had a reckless, and his mother had crossed over. He was very depressed, couldn't find a job. And there was a warrant out for his arrest because he hadn't paid the fine, which is something I didn't know. And he would always come round. He would, it's just ridiculous. I had to get his groceries and everything. And here I am. I've got my own home, my own bills to pay, and I'm working 7 days a week. And then on top of that, I was trying to find him jobs. And when he would get drunk, he would get really nasty. I mean, really nasty. And if he tried to touch me and I tried to get away, there were times where I slammed my head against the fridge. And he said, well, this is your own fault. And I was very much in survival mode. And there were times where I was on the floor crying and screaming at the universe because, he'd moved from an hour away to 2 doors down from me. So he could see. He was like, when I went away, he's like, where are you going? Why? And if I was home, he's like, why aren't you opening up your front door? Because I would bolt it from the inside. Because he had the keys and refused to return them. And I did ask him, and he just threatened me with immigration, something I was trying to sort out at the time. But when you're in that fight or flight mode, it becomes very, very hard. So the only focus that I had was really my work. I just wanted to work, and it was just, potting everything up. But the weird thing about this was, Furkhan, I was teaching people. I was doing my meditative art workshops. I was teaching Reiki. I was attuning people. But heal thyself. Yeah, that was something I needed to work on. And I think when I was screaming so hard at the universe, I even sold my home to get away from this guy, the home that I loved so much. And then when he had to move because he was evicted, he's like, Birgitta, can you please pay the deposit? I promise I'll pay you back. Made a contract. Did I get it back? No, of course not. Well, things did get even worse before they got better. But when I found another place to live, it was a bit of a money pit. And I only lived there, I think, for about not even a year and put it on the market because I wanted to get out and go back to the UK. And this is one of the things that happened as well. So I didn't have the money anymore. And because I was ripped off by the builders as well. Oh, that's just great. A builder that was a coke addict and an alcoholic. Great. Didn't pay the people he hired.
Yeah.
So I was left with the pieces. And so when I was screaming at the universe for help, it came in a little breadcrumb from my sister in the form of Kambo healing, shamanic frog healing. And very, very powerful. I just went with it, didn't really do much research, found a licensed practitioner up in North Florida, and I went. Thank the heavens I took a change of underwear with me, some change of clothes, because I'm telling you, as soon as the shaman burned some points in my leg, 4 points in my leg, oh my God, that heat just rushed to my to my face when he put the poison on the dots.
Yeah.
And I had this bucket next to me, and I was just purging. In the meantime, of course, you have to drink 2 liters of water.
Yeah.
I was just purging so badly, and I had to run up and down to the toilet because it just came out everywhere.
Yeah.
But the shaman was so used to that, and it was really a very physical experience, but it was powerful. And it took me 4 hours. And I always tell this, it took 4 hours because my ego was battling so hard. It'd been sitting in the driver's seat for all those years. And and so finally I kind of saw the light. And from that point on, that's when I changed my life even more. It was such a powerful experience. And I went back, I think, one more time over there, and then another time in the UK. But that's how I got into channeling, because it was like one day maybe 2 weeks later, my guides, or the universe, if you like, they just kicked me out of the house and said, you need to go to that fair. And I did. And that's where I met my former mentor, Alania Starhawk. And she's an amazing healer. She walked through some of my past lives to heal these aspects, and especially the aspect that with my ex in Florida, where he poisoned me in a past life. And it's one of the reasons that I suffered severe stomach issues for quite some time. I couldn't even hold a cup of tea in, and yet I was still working. I was literally skin over bones. And people say, yeah, but how do you but don't you leave your karma in another life? Don't you? Isn't that gone? Don't you start with a clean slate? No, you take remnants of it with you in this lifetime. And the beauty about healing that aspect of my life is that that energy changed completely, because, you know, everything is energy as it is anyway. And he left me alone for the couple of months that I was still there. But the thing about with Kambo was I made a whole bucket list of things that I wanted to achieve and do. And one of the things I did was skydiving, even though I'm so scared of heights, but I did it. I really did it. And running for cancer and for cancer charities and other different charities, because I promised my stepdad back when he passed away that I would be running for charity, and I never did. It took me 16 years to finally start doing that. But it gave me a lot more clarity. And, you know, I also learned to channel, and that was very powerful for me because it was very healing. And channeling is something, when I started doing it, I was really crying tears of joy because I thought to myself, I'm really good at something. Wow, this is amazing. And I think at that point, my mind was so shot to hell that I didn't even have to think after the workshop. And anybody can channel, to be honest with you. You just sit down with a notepad and a pen, and you just say to the universe, I'm open and ready to receive. Well, you take a couple of deep breaths, and then you say, I'm open and ready to receive. And rather than thinking, just write whatever comes. And it doesn't matter if you start out with one sentence or two sentences, but you build it up, just as when you're going to the gym.
Yeah, and I think there's an aspect of humility and openness there too, right? You have to be willing to receive it. And often we talk about you'll get what you need, not always what you want.
No, absolutely. And did they talk in riddles? Oh, sure they did.
Yeah, and I think that can be also uncomfortable for people, especially if they're early in that healing journey, because sometimes the answers require hard truths and stepping into discomfort and doing the things that are obviously will benefit you, but because we're so conditioned that it does require a lot of effort, and sometimes you have to take baby steps. The other thing you touched on was, and again, I can relate because you were doing all this work for others and helping them with their healing journey, but you weren't willing to do it for yourself. And that can feel ironic too. But again, it's often those reminders that, okay, I'm stepping into my purpose here, and maybe I need to do it for myself first before I can do it for others. And I can, like I said, relate to that. Now, just out of curiosity, you're doing all this work in terms of healing and supporting others, but you also do corporate work. How do you balance the two and still, they say, be of this world without being of this world? So
good
how
point.
do you find that balance?
That's funny you mentioned that expression. That's what I woke up with that this morning. And you're absolutely right. And it took me a while to find that balance because, you know, I work in oil and gas, which is totally opposite of the spiritual work. It's like two peas in a pod. And last year was tough for me because I worked my socks off. And because I took on 2 full-time roles within the company. And they just kept piling on me, and I just kept taking it on because I felt responsible. Oh, I'm sorry, but what happens when you get hit by a bus tomorrow? Oh, do you really think that your employer is not going to replace you? I'm sorry, but you'll be replaced in the space of 2 or 3 weeks. You're just a number. And I'm not saying that's within every company,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, you're going to be replaced.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we do this to ourselves? Why are we in this rat race of life? I always say mea culpa because I worked 70 hours a week, pretty much constant last year.
Yeah.
So I worked an extra and I calculated pretty much 5 months extra on top of the year. That's insane. That is
Mm-hmm.
insane. Do you think I got extra for that? No. By the time
Oh,
you get your bonus, 40% is tax. There's no point in it.
yeah.
No point.
Right. Right.
And it's like, but there is more to life. Just
Mm-hmm.
because we have to pay our bills, keep a roof over our head, it's like our job, our wages are like the drug that keeps us going.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. Why don't we not
Right.
follow our passions, whatever that may be?
Mm-hmm.
And because we're so programmed to live a certain way, to be a certain way, that we've forgotten our true nature. We've
Mm-hmm.
totally forgotten our true nature. It's like this world revolves around money and the material.
Mm-hmm.
And if we seek abundance, first heal from within. And
Right.
abundance can come in so many forms. But if you follow your passion, if you follow your heart, they're calling it the journey of the soul. If you follow the journey of the soul, it's you will live a far more fulfilled life. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it was pretty much a wake up call as well, because I couldn't breathe properly anymore. It was so bad. I'd lost weight. I'd lost about 8 kilograms, and and I did it to myself, really did it
Yeah.
to myself. And yeah, I really had to take a long, hard look at myself in the mirror and think, you know what, this is not serving me. This is not who I am. This is not what I want to do in life. And so I dropped one of the roles, and now it's more balanced, and I just do my
Mm-hmm.
40 hours and that's it. That is it.
Mm-hmm.
Because for now I need it until I transition completely out of it. And
Yeah.
that just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I chuckle because I relate completely. I'm in very similar situation, and I've had to learn the hard way. And very similar to yourself, I was putting in a lot of hours, and at one point I had to reflect on I missed out on a lot of time of my son's early years.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking at him and I'm like, oh, I can't get that time back. And I have really nothing to show for it, which is a very tough thing to come to face with.
Yeah.
And very similar to yourself, trying to find that balance, but it is tough because we live in a society where we get conditioned that you need to have a home, which you have to pay bills for. And it's that rat race, like you said, and it's hard to navigate. And I think it comes in seasons. Whereas last year I was in a very good place and felt like I was really focusing on my spiritual path.
Yeah.
But this year I've taken on more responsibilities so that I'm not able to carve out that time. So I'm trying to find that balance and juggling through it. But that's, again, like we've covered, the beauty of life. It's an ongoing struggle and you have to continue to work through it. So with that being said, how do you then make time for it? Because something that emerged from your own healing is your spiritual journey. How are you prioritizing that?
Well, first of all, when it's either in the morning or at night, it just depends. I
Mm-hmm.
just do a meditation, and that helps me to focus.
Mm-hmm.
That really helps me. And yeah, I mean, for me right now, my podcast, I love doing my podcast, but it's almost like I have like a mini break. And so all I do is, yes, but I do my light language, but and my channeling in my own time right now, because I've got books coming out anyway. And my next book I will start eventually, but it's kind of nice just to have a little bit of a break. And like I said, it's just important to prioritize yourself. And it's hard to do that, especially when you have a family. But you are important, and self-love and self-care and nourishing your own spirit are important, because if you don't, you're pouring from an empty cup. Yeah, and we can keep running out of steam and walking around like a headless chicken, but that is not going to serve us. And many people walk around like crazy. It's like I said, it's like a rat race. And I look around and I think to myself, I'm so glad I left the UK, because especially there right now, it's super expensive. And that is the thing, right? Prices have gone up. So people have to make the hours.
Yes.
And that's deviating from our awareness. And it's done so by design.
Yeah.
It's done on purpose, because the more they can exercise control, the more they've got us in our back pocket. And I call that enslavement of humanity. And people just don't see it.
No.
And, I'm in Spain now, and it is a lot cheaper. It is better, so to speak. It's better quality of life. I won't stay here forever, but for now, it's serving its purpose of having healed and just transforming and focusing on myself.
Yeah.
And that's what's important. And it's not selfish to focus on yourself. It is that self-love is really important, because I said this earlier, because we are all energy. If we don't focus on ourselves, we keep getting these kinks in the cable of things that we are wanting to achieve, because we are at this dis-ease within ourselves. And so our spirit, our soul is not aligned accordingly within our body. And that is really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And you touched on the enslavement piece. I was actually having I would say almost a debate with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned something similar, and he was just so offended by that suggestion, because you have a choice. You can say no to the work, but to your point, it's tough because, interest rates go up, there's inflation. So how do you make the numbers go around, right? And sometimes that means you have to keep working or working more, because you perhaps have a family to feed, or just even yourself. And I think, to your point, that awareness definitely helps to at least do the best you can to not fall into that trap or the rat race. But it can be very difficult for many people, and they just get so absorbed in it that they don't have the time to raise their head and even look around and recognize what it's doing to not only their physical health, their mental health, but their spiritual health as well. And I think that can be a very tough place to be in. One of the things I did want to at least bring an end to this episode with was, I thought it was very fascinating, was in your book, the foreword was from your mom. And I thought it was fairly beautiful that she saw you, and she talks about some of the stuff you've gone through and your resilience. How did that feel to see that coming from your mother, and see she's been witness to it all, the ups and downs,
Yes.
be able to talk about it?
Yeah. I mean, that was beautifully written. That was, it's nice to read that back. And, my mom, it's funny because my mom doesn't believe in the stuff that I do, but she still supports me. And she openly admits that, but she knows that I battled my way through life, and that I'm still here. There's one other thing that she said to me, is that in 2017, when I returned to the UK, I had nothing, absolutely nothing. And I had to start again. I've started many times in my life. But I said to my mom, I haven't achieved anything. And she looked at me and she's like, but you have. I said, no. I said, look at these people that I know. They're married, they've got kids, they've got jobs, they've got a house. You see this on social media. My mom's like, but look what you've achieved. You've traveled the world. You've always managed to work wherever you went. You've seen different cultures, met many different people. And she's like, how many people can say that? And and that is absolutely true. And it's not about having the house, having the mortgage, having the family, having the kids. Absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are the visible metrics, right? And I think
Yeah.
what your mom, I think, was highlighting there was you've built resiliency. And
Yes.
some people never manage to do that over their lifetimes. And sometimes people just shy away from it. And that's what I've taken from everything you've shared with me is how resilient you've been. And I know your counselor told you that, but it didn't mean much at the time. But looking back, it's you have a story to tell, and it
Yes.
shows how resilient you've been. And I appreciate you sharing that with us today. And I do want to end it on a note where, for people that are perhaps in similar paths or on similar paths as you, what would you offer them as they're trying to figure it out, or they just can't see that light in terms of where does this healing start? What would
Well,
you offer
healing,
them?
yeah, good point. Well, healing starts with you, not with anybody else. I don't care what anybody else says. People have their opinions about you. It doesn't matter, right? It matters what you feel and how you feel about yourself and how you decide to take that first step to healing. And there's no shame in that at all. Look, what works for me doesn't have to work for others, right? You have to
Yeah.
do what aligns with your spirit, but do not sit there on that couch. Just reach out for help and take that first step to bettering your life. Because I can tell you, the journey of healing, even though you have to walk through the darkness and hug it out with your demons, because they're demons are not really your foe, they're actually friends friends in disguise, so to speak. They're there to help you with the triggers. But yes, do whatever aligns with your spirit. And when you come out the other side, peeling back the layers eventually, it is well worth it. It really is worth it, because you release so much junk from your mind, because that's where we keep our experiences, the
Yes.
pain of our experiences. We keep it in the archives of our minds. And when it's so full, our mind is so full, we often suffer from any kind of disease, whether that's depression, for instance, anxiety, you name it, because we don't alchemize, we don't heal up from our experiences. We pot
Yeah,
it up.
absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned is not to be attached to the outcome and taking
Correct.
it one day at a time. It is truly one day at a time. Some days are going to be great. Some days are going to be really tough, but that's the dance, right? And I think you have to just have acceptance and humility. And that's what's helped me navigate through it. And it still isn't easy by any means.
No, it's not. It's not. But I think forgiveness is very important as well.
Mhm.
Forgiving ourselves and having compassion, being kind to ourselves rather than, beating ourselves up in boxing ring,
Yes.
and just hugging it out with ourselves and loving ourselves. It's so, so important.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for this and everything you were able to share. I know it's a part of your story and you put it out, but it's always one of those things, right? It requires a lot of vulnerability. So I do appreciate that. I know you've shared some of your stuff that's out there, but for listeners that do want to see more of your work, or if they want to even reach out to you, what are some ways they can do that?
And they can reach me via my website, which is powersoulhealing.com. I'm on YouTube under Power Soul Healing and Instagram under Universal Light Warriors.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It was such an honor to have you on here and have this conversation with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Furkhan.
Thank you for checking out this episode with Birgitta. As always, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. That's the best and easiest way to support this podcast. And on Apple and Spotify, you can leave up to a 5-star review. Please check out the sponsors in the show note captions, and as well as evergreenpodcast.com for their network of podcasts, including Easy Conversations. And finally, please subscribe to the Easy Reflections newsletter, a zero-cost newsletter that goes out once a week, where I summarize these podcast episodes and reflect on different mental health topics. Thank you again, and until next time.